The SUNY College of Environmental Science and Forestry, founded in 1911, is now the only institution of higher learning in the United States dedicated solely to the study of natural resources and the environment.
Hello, welcome to Improve Your World with SUNY-ESF. I'm your host, Don Torrance, and in the next half hour, we'll be joined by ESF student George Westby, whose studies have taken him all the way to the Antarctic, where he's been conducting research for the past 2 summers. And Dr. Robert Werner, author of Freshwater Fishes of the Northeastern United States, will also be in the studio. We're now joined by Scott Shannon. He is an associate professor in landscape architecture at SUNY-ESF and a registered landscape architect in New York and California. He's been on the ESF faculty for 18 years now. He joins us today to talk about his contribution to the book Outside the Not-So-Big House, Creating the Landscape of Home by Sarah Susanka and Julie Moyer-Messervy. I hope I've got those pronunciations right.
Very close.
Okay, close is good. Thanks for being on our show today, Scott.
Thank you.
Tell us first and foremost what your chapter is about in the book, because it's got, I think, some very applicable information for people around here.
The chapter that I contributed to is really all about my own house. The book is a compilation of different houses and gardens from around the country. Each of them is exemplifying a particular type of design or some interesting approaches to design for smaller residences, and that approach to doing things with a higher quality approach rather than just lots and lots of space.
And I noticed, too, that your house is representative of what you in the book call the inner suburbs, which would be, I guess, kind of the first ring of suburban development out from the urban centers of the previous century?
Yes, or places that may be very like that, in that the piece on my house is in Cazenovia, which I think the typical urban-suburban ring would be something like the university neighborhood right here in Syracuse. A lot of the villages around Syracuse also have very similar types of neighborhoods, and that's where our house is located, right in the central core of the village of Cazenovia.
A traditional kind of home with that sort of design, whether yours is a Dutch colonial, is that what we would call it? And not real large plots of land, but a lot of room for imagination to be applied at them.
Yes, we're only on about 1/5 of an acre, so there's not a whole lot of space, at least not by contemporary standards, where we're looking at half-acre or acre or larger lots on many of the newer homes today.
So how did you approach then the design for your gardens and lawns around your home?
Well, as a landscape architect, I approached it primarily from the perspective of everything that might be outside is an extension of things that we like to do inside, whether it's entertaining or gardening, and you design things literally to create outdoor rooms. So whether it's the front yard or the side yards or the backyards, each one is designed with an intent of creating a particular type of space that supports the types of things that you might want to do there, just like in your living room or your dining room or your kitchen.
Now, you paid some attention to the dynamic, if you will, of symmetry, yet you also wanted to integrate, as you're suggesting, the look of the house into the look of the yard, and also try to integrate the boundaries with your neighbors. That sounds like an awful daunting task for most of us.
In a lot of cases, I think if you've got a very new home on a larger lot, that becomes much more difficult. On a smaller lot, it almost becomes a necessity. We have only about 12 feet between our neighbor's house and ours. And in most cases, I think that's almost just leftover space. Nobody really knows what to do with it. We asked our neighbors if we could take a shot at designing something that worked for both of us. They were really open to giving me a free hand at designing something and then actually going out and building it. And I think both of us are really happy with how it worked out. In many of the other spaces, to get to your question about symmetry and some of the organizing principles, a lot of those really are extensions of the house itself. So by drawing the design ideas in the house into the garden, it really was a very logical step rather than something that was perhaps all that inventive in and of itself.
Now, do you always try to use native plantings and stonework and the like, or will you use anything you can find that you think will work?
I try as often as I can, particularly with the stonework and things, to use materials that are as closely associated with the locale as I can. With the plant materials, I try whenever I can to use native materials, but I'm also open to using more exotics as long as they're not invasive or the types that could cause problems later on.
In terms of what you have done with the stonework, for instance, around your home, there seems to be a combination there, and I don't know if this is a trend. I ask this because I've read some recent articles where somebody's identified it as a trend, where people are getting away from the more formal kind of garden and lawn design and to something that looks a little more what I would call wild, but I'm sure there's a better term for it than that. Is that a trend that you see, and did you make an attempt to mix those two kinds of design senses in yours?
I've definitely tried to mix them in that my garden's patterned a little bit after the arts and crafts period that we see a lot of here in central New York, influences of that, where there's a fairly strong backbone of the formality of the walks and that sort of thing. But the planting is very informal, very organic, and loosens it up quite a bit, particularly in certain seasons when the colors are just really spectacular in late spring, early summer.
When people approach you and ask you for your advice, your help, what do they seem to be looking more for? Is it the aesthetic quality of what they see when they step back from their home and their garden, or is it something that they're going to feel when they're in the midst of the finished product, the garden and the lawn and the like?
I get questions from homeowners on both, really. Sometimes if it's a situation where they may be looking for design advice in a specific situation, they may really be trying to find out what's the best way to get to that particular feeling of an outdoor room. Oftentimes, though, it's more the same sorts of questions that you ask anyone that you know has a particular background of what's wrong with this particular plant or this particular situation where my drainage isn't working. So you never know what the questions may be.
So your background really requires you to know an awful lot about botany and also about the use of materials like stone and everything, timber, anything. This is quite a comprehensive educational endeavor, I would imagine.
Very much so. In landscape architecture, we feel our students have to not only be specialists with things like choosing plants and understanding ecology and understanding the construction process, but they really have to be generalists in a lot of ways. They've got to know broadly about the environments that they're working in, broadly about the people and the cultures of the places that they're working, and they have to be able to meld culture with nature in just about every project that they work on.
Well, we appreciate your being with us here today. Great success with the book, and I've already learned a few things just looking through the first couple of chapters.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for joining us. Okay, outside the not-so-big house, Creating the Landscape of Home is available locally at Barnes & Noble bookstores and Borders bookstores. Coming up next, SUNY-ESF student George Westby will be in to talk about his experiences studying at a place where few of us will ever get the chance to go. You're watching Improve Your World with ESF. Don't go away.
High fuel costs, diminishing oil supplies, global warming. The time is now for safe alternative solutions. SUNY College of Environmental Science and Forestry is working on renewable energy solutions. For example, SUNY-ESF is part of a team working to develop the commercial use of willow crops and other woody biomass in the Northeast for safe, clean bioenergy and bioproducts. We really can improve your world. You can be part of the solution. Go to esf.edu to find out more.
You can improve your world by what you plant in your yard. It is commonly believed that invasive species arrived in the U.S. accidentally. Not so, according to a study by the Brooklyn Botanic Garden. They found that half of the worst invasive plant species were brought here intentionally for horticultural use. Gardening with native species is an effective way to deal with this problem. ESF's Improve Your World website has helped to find the right trees and plants.
And welcome back to Improve Your World with ESF. Joining me now is George Westby. George is a graduate student at SUNY-ESF and has spent the past 2 summers there, winters here, we'll explain that in a moment, conducting research at the U.S. A station in Antarctica as part of an international team of researchers. George, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
People need to remember that the seasons are reversed, so you're in the southern hemisphere at the far end of the world. So when you're down there doing your research, it has to be in the summer, I presume, because that's the only time you can operate down there.
Yeah, actually they have a lot of research going on in the winter also, but the summer is much more forgiving for us. And we were out on the peninsula also, so it was a lot less strenuous of an environment.
When you say the peninsula, describe to our viewers what peninsula you mean and why it's a little more hospitable.
Okay, well there's a long arm that sticks out from Antarctica, which is considered the peninsula. It's a long mountainous range that leads out to a connection across the Drake into Chile.
So it's heading north.
Correct.
Right.
It's actually a continuation, I think, of the mountain range that goes all the way up through Chile. I don't know the name of the mountain range.
But it's a little more, shall we say, towards the temperate zones. Up
exactly. Actually, the weather got to somewhere around 55 degrees, which was, 55 degrees Fahrenheit. And it was just beautiful there on a regular basis. It never got below 28 degrees Fahrenheit. So
rare treat for down that part of the world.
Actually, their summers are just like that. It's great.
Now, we've heard an awful lot of serious news, especially in the last year, really, with regard to the research and what it's showing us in Antarctica. Melting of ice sheets, breaking off from the continent, all sorts of indicators of global climate change, for instance.
Correct.
Can you give us sort of a thumbnail of how your work dovetails with all that climate change work?
We're working on a large scale, we're working on a smaller portion of a large cycle called the sulfur cycle. And what we're focusing on is the biological input of sulfur into the atmosphere.
And why is sulfur significant?
Sulfur is significant because it causes cloud formation. And the more clouds we have, the less sun we have coming in. And the less sun, the less heat we have to build up. So that makes it, it's kind of like a balancing factor. We've put so much CO2 into the atmosphere, and we're getting a greenhouse effect. But in essence, this sulfur input kind of reflects a bunch of the solar radiation, reduces our solar input.
So it could be palliative in a way to the global warming effects otherwise.
Correct. It's caused by the biological factors within the sea surface water. It's phytoplankton, little plants, and these little plants put off this sulfate molecule. And because the sulfate molecule will form clouds, it is a nice feedback.
I think a lot of people don't stop to think about how important and how complex the exchange is between the ocean, the land, and our atmosphere. We all take them for granted so much. You might be surprised to hear that little plants can put out enough sulfur to have that kind of an impact.
It is very, very interesting that they could do that. And there's a lot of different factors that go into it, seasonal changes, nutrient changes, temperature, and so on, solar radiation, the amount of solar radiation coming in. So it will change how much the phytoplankton actually grow.
So what are you concluding, other than there is an impact on the cloud formation in the immediate area of Antarctica, for the global climate and the change that we may be anticipating? Very
interesting aspect about this sulfate molecule is these phytoplankton, not the specific species, exist all over the entire globe. And they're doing the same thing everywhere. Places we've studied also in Bermuda. And in Bermuda, there is less of an effect, but still quite of a high level of this sulfur molecule. And it's affecting it there. So this local climate change turns into a global climate change.
People must envy the fact that you also get to have these terrific adventures when you're doing your work. I mean, very few of us would be able to experience all that's going on down in Antarctica. And as I say, there's been a lot of attention paid to it, both from the science and some pop culture products that are coming out these days. What really was it like on a day-to-day basis for you down there?
Wow. Well, this last trip in Antarctica was at Palmer Station. And being at Palmer Station, it's a very crowded environment, and you're kind of selected to be there. Maximum number of people is 45. And being that there's so few number of people allowed there, you have to put in as much research as quick as you possibly can. So we had some little fun excursions to go on, and see around the area and play with the animals and such, but we did mostly work.
Sure. Now, when you say play with the animals, we have a photo there that you brought back with you, I believe, of one of the denizens that people are most familiar with, the penguins. From what we know, again, in the sort of pop culture context, animals there are quite habituated to humans, at least some of them. Is that what you found to be the case, or is it simply that they're so unfamiliar with them that they show no fear often?
Yeah, that actually goes back to the Antarctic Treaty. Because there's an Antarctic Treaty, these animals don't understand that people could harm them. So we're not allowed to cause any harm or touch them or come within 15 feet of an animal.
But sometimes they come into contact with you.
They do, they actually do. And in that case, you're supposed to stand still and let them, do what they're going to do.
Right.
But as long as you don't affect their mode of transport or what it is that they're going after, you're within the lines.
Now, speaking of mode of transport, I understand from your notes that on a couple of occasions penguins actually jumped into your craft?
Oh yeah, last year, yeah. We were out in a little Zodiac boat, which is a rubber boat in the shape of a V, and it's nice and stable. We got out and some Adelie penguins were all just in a pod underneath us, like going really fast, trying to catch krill or whatever. And one of them decided it was going to jump up and grab a krill. At the same time as jumping through the water, it landed in our boat. So we had to take a very quick grab onto him and get him out of the boat. But that was better than letting him fondle around inside the boat and not figure his way out.
Right, risk injury or something of
exactly.
that sort. Yeah. There are other sorts of creatures down there. Seals, you said you saw a lot of seals.
We did, we saw.
Orca, other kinds of whales too?
Yep. We saw humpbacks, that was our favorite to see. Some minkies, but we did have killer whales in there, the orcas. And that was tremendous. A whole pod came through inside our local harbor and went in, did a little bit of a U-turn and headed back out. So it was very interesting. We had a couple people out in boats in Zodiacs during that period of time, and it was tremendous.
Now, how do those experiences, those encounters with large megafauna even, or the smaller ones, enrich your research work down there? It's more than just adventure for you, obviously. You must get the sense that you're doing something important, I would think.
Absolutely. You feel like you're trying to understand the environment to a certain level. What we're doing right now isn't going to affect the environmental changes that we need to today or tomorrow, but it will be sometime in the future. You see an animal like that and you say, this is one of the reasons that we're here, is to keep these animals alive and make sure that we're not going to kill off more of them.
Do you worry that your research might be misused sometimes, because there is such a policy debate going on, especially in our country, but worldwide really, about global climate change and man's influences on that? Are you ever concerned about that?
Actually, in the focus that we're working with, I'm not concerned with it at all. Everything that we study with sulfur just leads to good understanding of how sulfur is actually naturally interacting for us. So we don't have any real concerns in that area.
Well, it sounds like you're off to a wonderful start to your field science career. Thank you very much for stopping by. We surely do appreciate it. Send us more pictures next time you're down there.
Absolutely.
Do you have a trip coming up again soon?
It looks like Bermuda this summer.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, well, it's summertime, so.
Right.
But there is probably another trip to Antarctica in 2007. So that'll be the Ross Sea.
There you go. Children out there who are watching this, science can be a wonderful and exciting career.
Absolutely.
George Westby, thanks very much for stopping by.
Thank you very much, Don.
And we thank you for sticking with us here. You can visit the website, by the way, there it is up there, www.esf.edu/Antarctica, if you'd like to see more photos and some more information on the research that George and others from ESF have been doing down there at the bottom of our world. And next up on Improve Your World, we'll be talking to Robert Werner, author of Freshwater Fishers of the Northeastern United States. Stay tuned.
High fuel costs, diminishing oil supplies, global warming. The time is now for safe alternative solutions. SUNY College of Environmental Science and Forestry is working on renewable energy solutions. For example, SUNY-ESF is part of a team working to develop the commercial use of willow crops and other woody biomass in the Northeast for safe, clean bioenergy and bioproducts. We really can improve your world. You can be part of the solution. Go to esf.edu to find out more.
You can improve your world by learning more about it. From black bears in the Adirondacks to the restoration of Atlantic salmon in Lake Ontario and its tributaries, and the growing number of coyotes all across the state, SUNY-ESF offers details in its Environmental Information Series. Do we need to encourage growth or curtail it? Get the facts, then you decide. There's also advice for developing environmentally sensitive landscapes, how to test your soil pH, and what it means.
And welcome back. We now welcome Dr. Robert Werner, who is an emeritus professor of ichthyology and limnology. That's fish and lakes, correct?
That's correct.
And Dr. Werner is also the author of the book Freshwater Fishes of the Northeastern United States. Your book really serves as a field guide to northeastern fish. You live in the Finger Lakes area yourself. Wonderful book, and we'll talk about how you came to write it and put it together, and especially some of the illustrations too. But how would you hope that people would use this? Is it something they should take out into the field, or does it serve as an inspiration for them to appreciate what we've got, or some combination of the two?
Well, it is some combination of the two, actually, but the initial idea behind it was the bird people and the bird watchers have some excellent field guides, and these are absolutely wonderful, beautiful drawings of the birds themselves with arrows that highlight the key characters for identifying them. And I said, you know, fish are equally as beautiful once you get to see them. They're a little harder to see because they're underwater and they're in kind of an alien environment for human beings. But if you could do that, what kinds of characters would you want to use? And as it happened, the state of New York had some beautiful paintings that were done back in the 20s, 30s, and 40s as a part of the biological surveys by Ellen Edmondson and Hugh Crisp. And these are just wonderful things, and they were made available to me at the time. And I said, now, maybe we can put the two things together. Maybe we can take these beautiful drawings, because I can't paint or draw myself, and try to reconstruct them so that they work just like the field bird guides do. And so that was the effort, that was the idea that we followed.
Well, it's certainly wonderful. I think we have a couple of the pictures from the book that we can look at. This was a great discovery for you. They remind me of some of the classic nature paintings and etchings of Audubon and Holbrook and people like that who made an immense impact early on in the study of natural history. So this art really is a special type, though, because it has to serve two purposes, I would think. It is art, and we're looking now, I think that there's one, the tessellated darter, which is a fish perhaps many people are not familiar with, but we can talk a little bit about that. But it also has to help people actually identify what they might be seeing, whether they pull it up on a line or simply see it swimming in the water, if we're lucky enough to have low turbidity levels and nice clarity in our lakes, which we hope for. Tell us how they might use that illustration, for instance, to identify that fish from something that may look very similar.
Well, that's a good question, and that is a tessellated darter, and it's a very common fish. We find it in streams and even along the edge of lakes, very commonly in central New York. The key thing about that is that it is a darter. It's in the perch family, so it has two fins on its dorsal side, and in addition to that, it has along the lateral line, or along the side of the body, a series of dark markings. There they are, and if you look at it closely, you can see that they are either as an X, an M, or a W. They have that kind of a shape to it. So it's as if you had those markings along the side, or those letters along the side of the fish. So if you get the fish and you can look at it and you can see those things, the odds are pretty good you've probably got a tessellated darter. And the same thing is true of every species that we've got. There's little tricks that you can use, little key characters that you want to be looking for when you get the fish. So if you take the book into the field with you, those arrows will kind of point to the things you should be looking for. It's
a little more difficult to be a fish lover and watcher than it is to be a bird lover, putting up a feeder in your backyard, for instance, and letting them come to you. What do you suggest for people who are curious about the fish we have here? Is there some sort of system they can use? Some people are scuba divers, for instance, and you can take an up-close and personal look at many fish. People fish also and do catch and release and things of that sort. Are there other ways people can observe fish behaving naturally in their natural habitats?
Yes, there are. There's a lot of ways they can do that. One of the things I would suggest is use polarized sunglasses. That really helps cut the glare. Many people can actually stand along the bank of a lake or a bank of a stream and look down into the water, and at certain times of the year the fish are in close and shallow water and are spawning. Stand on a small bridge, and a country bridge, and over a stream and look down into the water. Those are all pretty good things to do. In addition, binoculars can help you. Just sit there and use binocs with Polaroid glasses and you can see them. A colleague of mine, C. Levette Smith, wrote a book on fish watching, and he outlined a whole series of kinds of things that you can do so that you can really see these fish up close and personal. It works well. And the last thing I would suggest, scuba diving is really good, but if you don't have scuba gear and you're not qualified to do that, you can put out a snorkel and a mask and get in a stream, even though the stream may only be a foot or two deep. And it really is quite interesting. The fish are not afraid of you. They stay pretty much where they are, and you can just kind of grab along the bottom and sort of work your way upstream and just see these fish up close and personal. It's a great experience.
Yeah, absolutely. I've seen kids doing that around here too, as a matter of fact. Now, I know that you're also interested in water quality issues and sustainability issues, invasive species. Can you quickly give us, in the few moments that we have left, a sense of, in this Finger Lakes region where you live and operate now, an update on the situation with regard to those two, water quality and invasive species? Are we in critical phase yet?
Well, we are, I think in some ways. The invasive species, I think, is beginning to become kind of the major issue. We went through a number of issues, pesticides, issues with eutrophication of lakes and things of that sort. Although it may not have stabilized, at least it doesn't appear to be quite the threat that invasive species are. Right now we have a global economy. We're exchanging products from all over the world. And one of the big things for our region is the fact that ships are coming into the Great Lakes region from Europe, from Asia, from a wide variety of other countries, and they take on ballast water in those countries. And when they do that, they bring water into their holds, then they come over to the States and they pick up whatever thing they're going to pick up, and they empty the ballast water. So they're transferring plankton, invertebrates, fish eggs, things of that sort, over into our waters, and they get in the Great Lakes, and then they begin to work their way throughout the entire area.
And they can reach even down to our area.
Yeah, and it gets to be a real serious problem.
Well, we could talk an entire show about that too, I'm sure. Dr. Werner, thank you very much for joining us, and we'll look forward to looking through your book.
Thank you.
Thanks again for joining us. Freshwater Fishes of the Northeastern United States, of course, is the name of the book if you want to look for it. That's all the time we have for today, though, for this edition of Improve Your World. I'm Don Torrance. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next time.